The hum of the server room was a lullaby for forgotten ghosts. For Officer Carla Voss, it was the soundtrack of her professional purgatory, a constant, low-grade reminder of the life she'd lost. She was a paper pusher now, an intelligence administrator whose most pressing daily task was ensuring the coffee pot in the break room didn't run dry. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, a different sound cut through the monotony, a shrill, digital shriek that clawed its way out of the main server speakers. A rogue drone, a sleek black insect of a machine, had bypassed every firewall, every countermeasure, and seized control. It began to speak, its voice a synthesized monotone that echoed through the panicked halls of the intelligence base. It said a name that hadn't been uttered in a decade, a name that was supposed to be buried under 6 feet of classified redactions. Specter-Zero. 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 The name belonged to a ghost, a myth, a weapon that the agency had locked away. That weapon was the woman now refilling toner cartridges in Supply Closet B. As the base's elite cyber analysts scrambled, failing to sever the connection, the simple admin lady walked calmly to the main terminal, her face a mask of placid indifference. She ignored the frantic shouts and typed a 12-digit code from memory, a sequence that was not in any active manual. The drone fell silent. Its lights went dark. A young, cocky analyst named Bryce stared at her, his face a mixture of awe and suspicion. How did you know that?" he stammered. Carla didn't answer the question he asked, but the one he was truly thinking. Could a simple woman who alphabetized intelligence reports hold the key to the agency's darkest secret? Before we carry on, please hit the subscribe button to make my day, and let me know where you are watching from in the comments. The silence that followed the drone's deactivation was heavier and more terrifying than the alarms had been. It was a weighted silence, thick with unspoken questions and the sudden, sharp focus of every eye in the command center on the unassuming woman in the sensible gray pantsuit. Carla Voss felt their stares like physical things, tiny needles pricking at the carefully constructed shell of mediocrity she had worn for the last 5 years. For 5 years, she had been a ghost of a different sort, haunting the periphery of the world she once commanded. She had mastered the art of being overlooked, of blending into the beige walls of the facility until she was just another fixture. Now, that camouflage was stripped away, burned off by the broadcast of 2 words. Bryce, the analyst, still stood by the terminal, his mouth slightly agape. He was young, brilliant, and accustomed to being the smartest person in any room. His world was one of logic, code, and predictable outcomes. Carla's action was an anomaly, a variable he couldn't account for. "That override," he began again, his voice regaining a measure of its usual confidence. "It's a legacy code. Predates the current encryption protocols by at least a decade. It shouldn't have even worked on a modern drone's OS." He looked at her, truly looked at her, for the first time since she'd been assigned to his administrative sector. He didn't see the woman who sorted his travel receipts. He saw a stranger. Carla offered him nothing. No explanation, no flicker of emotion. Her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs, a wild rhythm that betrayed the calm she projected. The code had come to her fingers unbidden, a phantom limb moving with a will of its own. It was muscle memory, from a life she had tried to surgically remove from her own mind. Specter-Zero. The name felt alien in the sterile air of the command center. It belonged to the shadows, to the whispered conversations in hostile territories, to the cold sweat of a mission gone sideways. It did not belong here, amongst the ergonomic chairs and the stale scent of microwaved popcorn. Director Madsen appeared at the edge of the room, parting the sea of stunned technicians like a shark moving through a school of fish. He was a man carved from granite and disappointment, his face a roadmap of political battles and compromised ethics. He had been the one to sign her demotion papers. He had looked her in the eye and told her she was lucky to still have a job. The desk duty was a mercy. His eyes, small and hard like ball bearings, locked onto hers. He didn't need to ask how she knew the code. He knew, or at least, he knew of the program she was once a part of. The program that officially never existed. "My office, Voss," he said, his voice low and tight, meant for her alone. Now, it wasn't a request. It was the reassertion of a power dynamic she had lived under for half a decade. The subordinate, the problem, the loose end being called to account. But something had shifted in the last 5 minutes. The drone hadn't just broadcast her name, it had broadcast her power. The fear that had been her constant companion for 5 years, the fear of being discovered, was suddenly replaced by a different, more potent kind of fear. The fear of what was coming for her. The drone wasn't a random hack. It was a message. It was a key turning in a lock she thought had been melted shut. She looked at Madsen, at the man who had relegated her to a life of bureaucratic oblivion. She saw the flicker of alarm in his eyes, the dawning realization that the ghost he thought he had contained was standing before him. For the first time in 5 years, she felt a sliver of control. The script had been flipped. He wasn't just her boss anymore. He was a man who needed something from her. Information. Carla gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. Then, without a word, she turned her back on Director Madsen, on the gawking analysts, and on the silent, deactivated drone. She walked. Her footsteps were steady, and even on the polished linoleum floor. She didn't run. She didn't hurry. She walked with the deliberate pace of someone who knew exactly where they were going. Not to Madsen's office. Not back to her desk. She walked past the security checkpoint, her clearance badge still granting her access. The guards, flustered by the recent alarm, barely glanced at her. She was just Carla Voss, the admin lady, a harmless part of the background scenery. She walked out of the main entrance and into the late afternoon sun. The sudden warmth on her skin was a shock after the recycled, refrigerated air of the facility. She didn't look back. In her mind, she was already stripping away the layers of her new life. The commuter car and the long-term lot, the sparsely furnished apartment, the book club she had joined but never spoken in. They were props, pieces of a costume she no longer needed. The drone had been a curtain call. Specter-Zero was back on stage, and she was dangerously exposed. Her first priority was to disappear, but not in the way she had before. This time, she wouldn't be hiding in plain sight. She would be vanishing completely. Her mind, long dulled by administrative tasks, began to click back into its old, lethal gear. She bypassed her own car, a predictable destination. Instead, she walked to the public bus stop just outside the main gate, a route used by the facility's civilian contractors and cleaning staff. She sat on the hard plastic bench between a janitor and a food service worker, pulling a cheap paperback novel from her purse, another prop from her cover life. She held it up, obscuring her face, but her eyes weren't on the pages. They were scanning, assessing, analyzing. Every car that passed, every person who glanced her way was a potential threat. The drone wasn't an isolated event. It was the opening move in a game she didn't yet understand. Someone from her past had reached out. It could be a warning from an ally, or a declaration of war from an enemy. There was no way to know which. The Spectre program was the agency's deepest, darkest secret. A clandestine unit of off-the-books operatives, trained to be deniable assets, ghosts who could move through the world without leaving a trace. They were given new identities, new lives, and one single, unbreakable rule: stay dead. To be activated, especially so publicly, meant something had gone catastrophically wrong. The bus arrived with a hiss of air brakes. Carla got on, paid her fare in cash, and took a seat in the rear, giving her a clear view of all the other passengers in the door. As the bus pulled away from the curb, she caught a glimpse of 2 black sedans with government plates screeching to a halt in front of the facility entrance. Madsen's men. They were already looking for her. Too slow. They were looking for Carla Voss, the timid administrator. They had no idea how to hunt a Spectre. She rode the bus for 6 stops, getting off in a crowded downtown district she had never visited before. She immediately ducked into a sprawling, multi-level department store. Inside, she moved with purpose. First, to the public restroom. She entered a stall and stripped off the gray pantsuit, the uniform of her captivity. Underneath, she wore a simple black t-shirt and dark, flexible trousers. a habit she had never been able to break. She stuffed the suit into a sanitary bin. In another stall, she found a discarded newspaper. She used a page of classified ads to scrub the heavy-duty, long-wear makeup from her face, revealing the sharper lines of a woman who was no longer trying to look soft and harmless. She looked in the mirror and saw a faint echo of the woman she used to be. There were new lines around her eyes, etched not by age, but by a bone-deep weariness. Next, she went to the electronics department. She purchased a cheap, prepaid burner phone and a power bank, paying in cash. Then, to the camping and outdoor section. She bought a durable, nondescript backpack, a water filter, a high-lumen flashlight, and a multi-tool. Each purchase was a deliberate step, rebuilding her operational kit from scratch. In the clothing department, she bought a dark hoodie, a baseball cap, and a pair of sturdy hiking boots, replacing the sensible flats she had worn out of the facility. Within 30 minutes, Carla Voss had effectively ceased to exist. In her place was a woman who was prepared, efficient, and anonymous. She left the store through a different exit, melting into the evening crowds. She walked for several blocks, taking random turns, doubling back on herself, ensuring she wasn't being followed by sight. She knew visual surveillance was just the first layer. They would be tracking her digital footprint, what little there was. Her credit cards, her phone, her car's GPS. All of it was now a liability. She had already mentally discarded them. The burner phone was her only link to the world, and she wouldn't even turn it on until she was certain she was in a secure location. And she knew just the place. A ghost needed a place to hide, and the best place to hide was in a graveyard of secrets, with someone who was as much a ghost as she was. She needed to find Julian. The address wasn't written down anywhere. It was a string of geographic coordinates committed to memory. A failsafe from her former life. Julian was the chief architect of the Specter program's technology. He was the one who built their untraceable communication systems, their encrypted hardware, and the very override codes that Carla had used on the drone. He was a digital phantom, a genius who had a falling out with the agency years ago, over ethical lines they were willing to cross, and he was not. He'd faked his own death. A move so convincing that even Madsen likely believed it, and disappeared into the sprawling, anonymous guts of the country. He had told her once, "If you ever go loud, if the whole world turns upside down, don't run to the agency. They'll bury you to protect the secret. Run to me." The world had just turned upside down. Carla found a quiet alley, checked it twice for cameras, and finally powered on the burner phone. She didn't make a call. Instead, she used its basic web browser to access a public library's online chess server, a site so archaic and obscure it was unlikely to be monitored. She logged in with a username she hadn't typed in a decade, Nix, and challenged a specific user, Daedalus. She didn't expect him to be waiting, but the system was automated. She made her first move, pawn to e4. It was a standard opening, but the game itself was a key. The sequence of her first 10 moves would form a coded message, telling Julian she was active, she was in distress, and she needed a meeting. It was a digital dead drop, slow and cumbersome, but infinitely more secure than a phone call. She sent the move, then immediately powered the phone off, and removed the battery. She would have to wait 24 hours, find another secure access point, and check for his reply. For the next 24 hours, she would be completely alone, with only her instincts to keep her alive. She moved towards the city's industrial waterfront, a forgotten landscape of abandoned warehouses and rusting shipyards. It was a place where people learned to mind their own business, where a woman with a backpack and a haunted look in her eyes wouldn't draw a second glance. She found an old cannery with a broken lock and slipped inside. The air was thick with the smell of brine and decay. High on a rusted catwalk, she found a small, defensible space with a view of the only 2 entrances. She settled in for the night, the multi-tool resting in her hand. The soft, doughy woman who organized spreadsheets was gone. The woman who remained was sharp, cold, and ready to fight. Sleep would not come easy, but for the first time in years, she felt a strange and terrible sense of purpose. She was no longer waiting for her life to end, she was fighting for it to begin again. The hum of the server room was gone, replaced by the lonely sound of the wind rattling against corrugated steel. It was the sound of freedom, and it was terrifying. The 24 hours crawled by with agonizing slowness. Carla remained in the abandoned cannery, a silent predator in her rusty perch. She survived on the protein bars and water she had purchased, forcing herself to consume them mechanically. Hunger and thirst were weaknesses, data points to be managed. Her mind, however, was a chaotic storm. Freed from the forced stupor of her administrative life, it raced through possibilities, threats, and memories she had long suppressed. She remembered the training, the brutal, relentless conditioning designed to strip away her identity and rebuild her as an instrument of state policy. They had called it ego death. She remembered the faces of the other Spectre candidates, young men and women who, like her, had been selected from various branches of intelligence and special forces for their unique combination of intelligence, physical prowess, and psychological resilience. Or, as her cynical handler once put it, for being the perfect combination of brilliant and broken. Most of them had washed out. Some had broken completely. Only a few had earned a number. She was Specter-Zero, the prototype, the first to successfully undergo the full program. This meant her file, if it even still existed in a physical form, would be the most damning. Her demotion wasn't a simple matter of professional failure. It was a memory she replayed now, not with shame, but with cold, analytical clarity. The mission had been in Vienna. She was tasked with retrieving a stolen list of active deep-cover NATO agents from a rogue Russian FSB general. It was supposed to be a simple snatch and grab, but the intelligence was bad. The meat was a trap. She found herself cornered, with hostiles closing in. Standard protocol was to scrub the mission and escape, to protect the Spectre program's secrecy at all costs. But the general wasn't just carrying the list. He was with a civilian asset, a young university student he was using as a translator, who had no idea what was happening. Protocol dictated the asset was acceptable collateral damage. Carla had made a different choice. She broke protocol, creating a loud, violent diversion to give the student a chance to escape. She got the list, but she left a trail of chaos that was impossible to deny. The agency couldn't acknowledge her, so they pinned the unsanctioned operation on a decorated but conveniently expendable field officer. Carla Voss, the decorated officer, was publicly reprimanded and quietly buried in the one place they were sure she could do no more harm, a windowless administrative department under the watchful eye of Director A. Madsen. They had let her live, but they had taken her life. Now, she wondered if that single act of mercy, saving the student, had somehow led to this. Had she left a thread that someone had finally pulled? At dusk on the second day, she made her move. She found a small 24-hour internet cafe in a rundown strip mall, the kind of place that smelled of stale cigarette smoke and desperation. It was perfect. The clientele kept their eyes glued to their screens, lost in their own worlds. She paid for an hour of time in cash, choosing a terminal in the darkest corner of the room. Her hands were steady as she navigated back to the chess server. The username Daedalus had responded. His move was unorthodox, a night retreat that seemed defensive. But it wasn't a chess move, it was a message. Carla translated the coordinates encoded in his play. It wasn't an address. It was a locker number at a bus station on the other side of the city, and a time, 2 a.m. Precise. Clinical. That was Julian. Getting there was a risk. Madsen would have the city's transit hubs under heavy surveillance. His people would be looking for a woman matching her description, traveling alone. She needed to change her appearance more drastically. She returned to the department store from the day before, a calculated risk, but she banked on them not expecting a return visit. This time she went to the cosmetics aisle. She bought cheap, black hair dye, foundation several shades darker than her natural skin tone, and a pair of non-prescription glasses with thick black frames. In the store's bathroom, she did a quick, messy dye job, chopped at her hair with the scissors on her multi-tool until it was an uneven, shoulder-length bob, and applied the makeup. The woman who looked back at her from the mirror was a stranger once more, sallow-skinned, with dark, unkempt hair, and the severe look of an academic. It was enough. She took a circuitous route to the bus station, switching buses 3 times and walking the last 2 miles. The station at 1:45 a.m. was a hollow, echoing place, populated by tired travelers and the city's homeless seeking refuge from the night. She moved through the space slowly, her backpack held tight, her eyes scanning everything. The clock on the wall ticked past 2 a.m. No one approached her. There was no sign of Julian. This was part of the protocol. He would never expose himself at a meet. The meet was the dead drop. She found the designated locker. It was unlocked. Inside was a beat-up leather satchel. It felt heavy. She took it, leaving nothing behind, and walked out of the station without looking back. She found another dark alley several blocks away before she dared to look inside. The satchel contained a laptop, a set of keys, a wallet containing $5,000 in assorted small bills, and a fake driver's license with her new, sallow-faced picture and the name Anna Fisher, and a small, metallic object. It was a car key. She pressed the panic button. In the distance, from a multi-story parking garage, she heard the faint chirp of a car alarm. Julian was thorough. She found the car, a forgettable 10-year-old sedan, parked on the 4th level of the garage. It was dusty and unassuming, the perfect getaway vehicle. She got in, locked the doors, and finally allowed herself a moment to breathe. She opened the laptop. There was no password. The desktop was blank except for a single audio file named Listen. She clicked it. Julian's voice, distorted by a modulator but still recognizably his, filled the small car. "Nix. I was sorry to hear the birds were singing your song. Things are worse than you think. The drone that pinged you wasn't a message from an old friend. It was a bloodhound. Someone reactivated the Specter emergency broadcast network, but they're using it to hunt, not to warn." There was a pause, the sound of a weary sigh. "The override code you used, the 12-digit legacy key, it didn't just deactivate the drone, it sent a confirmation signal back to the source. A digital handshake. It confirmed that Specter-Zero is alive, and at that location. You didn't just reveal yourself to Madsen, Carla. You confirmed your existence to the people who are pulling the strings. Madsen is a puppet. He's scared, and he's being squeezed." End quote. Carla felt a cold dread seep into her bones. Her decisive action, the one thing that had given her a feeling of control, had been a trap. She had walked right into it. The drone's source signal was heavily masked. Julian's voice continued. "Bounced through a dozen untraceable proxies. But I found a fragment, a digital watermark buried deep in the code. It's proprietary tech from a private military contractor, a company called Ares Strategic Solutions. They specialize in advanced drone warfare and officially have no government contracts. Unofficially, they're a cutout, a deniable third party for the kind of wet work the agency can't afford to be linked to." End quote. Ares. The name meant nothing to her. "Why?" she whispered to the empty car. "Why now?" Julian seemed to anticipate her question. "That's the part I can't figure out. Why hunt the Specters? We were the perfect weapons, loyal and deniable. My best guess? Someone is cleaning house, tying up loose ends. The Specter program was officially decommissioned 7 years ago, right after you were reassigned. The assets were supposed to be permanently deactivated, their memories wiped, and integrated back into civilian life. But you and I know that the memory wipe tech was never stable. Maybe some of the others are starting to remember. Maybe someone wants to ensure the ghosts stay buried." The audio file continued. "The car is clean. The cache and ID should last you a while. The laptop has a secure, isolated connection. Use it to contact me. But don't stay in one place for long. The people running Ares are not like the agency bureaucrats you're used to. They are hunters. And now, you are their confirmed target. There's one more thing. The man who founded Ares Strategic Solutions, the CEO, is a man named Kalen Vance. He's ex-Special Forces, dishonorably discharged about 15 years ago. Before he went private sector, he was one of the lead trainers at the Specter program's primary conditioning facility. He helped design the psychological protocols. He helped break you. He knows how you think, Carla. He knows how you'll run." The audio file ended. Kalen Vance. The name hit her like a physical blow. She remembered him. Not his face, which was always in shadow, but his voice. A calm, persuasive voice that could coax out your deepest fears and then use them to build you into a killer. He was the architect of their minds, just as Julian was the architect of their tech. He wasn't just some abstract enemy. He was her creator. And he was hunting his own creation. The implications were staggering. The program she belonged to was hunting its own. Her former trainer was now her executioner. Madsen and the agency were caught in the middle, trying to contain a secret that was now bleeding out into the open. She looked at the fake ID. Anna Fisher. It was another mask, another layer of deception. But this time, she wasn't hiding from her past. She was arming herself to confront it. She started the car. The engine turned over with a quiet, reliable hum. She pulled out of the parking garage and merged into the pre-dawn traffic, just another anonymous car on a highway leading out of the city. She had a new name, a new face, and a destination. She had to understand what Ares wanted. And to do that, she had to stop running from Kale and start hunting him. Her first stop would be to find the ghost of another Specter, to see if she was truly the only one being haunted. Carla drove for 18 hours straight, pushing west, away from the dense political web of the capital. The city lights bled into sprawling suburbs, then into the dark, open expanse of the heartland. She drove the aging sedan with a light foot, staying in the right lane, becoming one with the river of anonymous traffic. She was Anna Fisher, a woman with a cheap car and a need to be somewhere else. But inside, her mind was a whirlwind of activity. Kalen Vance. The name echoed with the chilling cadence of his training sessions. He had a particular talent for finding a person's psychological fault lines. He believed that to build a perfect soldier, you first had to completely deconstruct the person they were. He used sensory deprivation, fear induction, and a terrifyingly effective form of psychological manipulation to shatter their identities before reforging them. Carla had been his masterpiece, the first to endure the full process and emerge not just functional, but exceptional. Did he now see her as his greatest failure? Or was this some kind of twisted, final test? Using Julian's secure laptop at a grimy motel 600 miles from where she started, she began to dig. Julian had provided her with a private, encrypted search engine that scraped the dark web and secure servers, a tool far more powerful than anything available to the public. She started with Ares Strategic Solutions. On the surface, they were a polished, professional corporation. Their public website boasted of next-generation security solutions and unmanned aerial dominance. They sold perimeter defense drones to private corporations and consultation services to wealthy individuals. It was all clean, legal, and intensely boring. But Julian's intel was the key. Knowing they were a front allowed Carla to look for the cracks. She searched for connections between Ares and known agency shell corporations. She found them. Faint but undeniable digital handshakes in financial transactions and shared logistics servers. Ares was indeed a black-budget project, a way for the government to employ a private army with complete deniability. They were the modern, privatized evolution of the Specter program itself, more efficient, less personal, and with none of the lingering psychological baggage. Why use old, unstable assets like the Specters when you could hire a new army that was loyal only to the highest bidder? The answer was chillingly simple. They weren't being used, they were being erased. A product line being recalled and destroyed. Her next search was more personal and more dangerous. She typed in the names of the other Specters she could remember. There were only 4 others who had made it through the program with her. Specter 1, a stoic ex-Marine sniper named David. Specter 2, a former Mossad agent, a woman named Ilara. Specter 3, a cryptographer who was a prodigy named Marcus. And Specter 4, a young, reckless operative who specialized in infiltration named Leo. The search results came back with terrifying speed. David, who had been living under the name John Smith and working as a park ranger in Montana, had died 2 weeks ago. A hiking accident. His body was found at the bottom of a ravine. Plausible, but the timing was too coincidental. Marcus, who had become a mathematics professor at a university in Chicago, suffered a sudden massive stroke last week. He was only 34. Healthy, with no prior medical history. Unlikely. Leo, who had been working on an oil rig in the Gulf of Mexico, was reported missing, presumed dead, after falling overboard during a storm 5 days ago. A tragic accident. Too many accidents. That left Ilara. Carla's search for her came up empty. No public record, no death certificate, no social media presence under her cover name. She had vanished. Had Ares gotten to her already? Or was she like Carla, a ghost who knew how to stay a ghost? Carla remembered Ilara as the most paranoid of them all, the one who trusted the agency the least. She had always said that if the time came, she wouldn't run, she would dig in and set traps. Carla focused on Ilara's last known location, a small town in the arid plains of New Mexico. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead she had. Before she left the motel, she used the laptop to send a new chess move to Julian. It was a complex sequence, one they had never used before. It meant, "I'm hunting. Send supplies." She knew he would understand. The drive to New Mexico was a journey into a different country. The landscape became sparse and unforgiving, a palette of brown and red under a vast, empty sky. It was the perfect place to disappear. The town was little more than a dusty main street, a gas station, and a handful of houses. It looked sleepy, but Carla's instincts told her otherwise. Places like this, on the edge of nowhere, were often used as quiet bases for clandestine operations. She didn't drive into town. Instead, she parked the sedan in a rocky canyon a few miles out and approached on foot, using the terrain for cover. She spent hours observing the town from a ridge with a pair of binoculars she'd bought. She watched the people, the flow of traffic, the daily rhythms. Everything seemed normal, almost aggressively so. Then she saw it. A white panel van with no markings circled the main street 3 times in the space of an hour. The driver never got out. The windows were tinted too dark to see inside. It was a surveillance team. They weren't watching the town. They were waiting for someone. They were waiting for her, or for Ilara. This confirmed 2 things. Ilara was, or had been, here, and Ares knew she might have allies. They were expecting a Specter to come looking for another Specter. This was Cale's doing. He was predicting her moves, using her own training against her. He knew the instinct to regroup, to find strength in numbers. He had turned this dusty town into a baited trap. Carla backed away from the ridge, her mind racing. She couldn't go in. Not directly. She had to assume the town was wired, with cameras on every corner and listening posts in the buildings. She had to find another way. She remembered something about Ilara, a detail from their shared past in the training facility. Ilara had grown up on a kibbutz in Israel, in the Negev desert. She was comfortable in arid environments. She knew how to live off the land, how to use the harshness of the desert as a shield. If she was here, she wouldn't be in the town. She would be in the wilderness that surrounded it. Carla returned to her car and pulled out the laptop. She accessed detailed satellite maps of the area, looking for anomalies, signs of life where there shouldn't be any. It took hours of painstaking scanning, but she finally found it. 10 miles east of the town, in a maze of canyons and mesas, was a small, isolated ranch house. It was old and run down, but the satellite image showed a new, high-gain communications antenna on the roof. It was pointed straight up, designed for a satellite uplink, not for local reception. It was the kind of equipment Julian would use. And next to the house was a small solar array, providing off-grid power. This was Ilara's fortress. The white van in town was a decoy, meant to draw her attention while the real trap was being laid around the ranch. Cale would assume she'd spot the surveillance in town and then try a covert approach on the ranch, right into his waiting arms. He was playing chess, trying to stay 3 moves ahead. Carla decided it was time to stop playing his game. She wouldn't approach the ranch. She would do what Cale didn't expect. She would go back to town. She drove to a truck stop 30 miles away and changed her appearance again. This time, she went for a bolder look. She bought a cheap, blonde wig, flashy costume jewelry, and a pair of brightly colored cowboy boots. She was no longer the mousy academic, Anna Fisher. She was now a tourist who had taken a wrong turn, loud, lost, and completely harmless. She drove the sedan right into the center of town in the middle of the afternoon, parking in front of the only diner. She got out, looked around with exaggerated confusion, and went inside. The diner was quiet. A few locals nursed cups of coffee. The white van was parked across the street. Carla sat at the counter, ordered a slice of pie she had no intention of eating, and started talking to the waitress, her voice loud enough to carry. She asked for directions to a famous, and entirely fictional, local landmark, complaining about the bad GPS signal on her phone. She was playing the part of a fool, a piece of background noise. From her seat, she could see the reflection of the van in the diner's window. After a few minutes, a man got out of the passenger side. He was dressed like a local, in jeans and a flannel shirt, but he moved with the stiff posture of someone in law enforcement or the military. He didn't look at her. Instead, he walked down the street and entered the town's small sheriff's office. Cale wasn't just using his own men. He was co-opting local authorities, giving his operation a veneer of legitimacy. Carla had what she needed. She knew their forward operating base. Now, she could create a diversion. She paid for her pie, got back in her car, and drove out of town, heading in the opposite direction of the ranch. She knew the man in the van would report her presence, a harmless tourist who had come and gone. They would dismiss her. That was her goal. That night, she returned. She left the car miles away and approached the sheriff's office on foot, cloaked in darkness. The building was small, with only 2 deputies on night duty. The Ares team, she surmised, would be using a back room, a temporary command post. She circled the building, staying in the shadows, her eyes scanning for security cameras and motion detectors. Cale's team would be professional. They would have hardened the location. But Cale had taught her more than just how to run. He had taught her how to think. He had taught her that the most effective attack is often not on the target itself, but on its support system. She had no intention of breaking into the sheriff's office. She was going to burn it down, digitally. She found a junction box for the town's primary fiber optic cable a block away from the office. It was an old, weather-beaten box, easily overlooked. Using the tools from her multi-tool and a small device she had requested from Julian, a high-powered signal jammer that he had left for her in a drop location she'd passed on the way, she got to work. It took her 20 minutes of tense, delicate work in the dark. She didn't cut the cable. That would be too obvious. Instead, she attached a device that would flood the line with garbage data, a relentless stream of digital noise. She activated it. Inside the sheriff's office, every screen connected to the network would have just gone haywire. Their surveillance feeds, their communication links to the team at the ranch, their connection to the wider Ares network, all of it would be gone, replaced by a waterfall of nonsensical code. It would be chaos. It wouldn't last forever. They would figure it out and switch to satellite comms, but it would create a window of confusion. A window of opportunity. While they were blinded, she moved. She ran, not away from the town, but towards the ranch. She had to warn Ilara. She had to hope that the paranoid ex-Mossad agent hadn't already mistaken her for one of the hunters. The race was on. She was no longer reacting to Cale's moves. She was making her own, forcing him to react to her. The board was set, and the pawns were finally fighting back. The 10-mile run to the ranch was a brutal, lung-searing ordeal through the cold desert night. Carla pushed herself, ignoring the burn in her muscles and the stitch in her side. Every rustle of a bush, every shadow cast by the moonlight, was a potential enemy. She knew Cale's team would be redeploying, shifting their focus from the digital chaos she had created to securing their primary target, Ilara. The signal jammer had bought her time, but the clock was ticking. She approached the ranch from the high ground, moving with a practiced stealth that was as much a part of her as breathing. The house was dark. a silent silhouette against the star-dusted sky. There were no lights, no signs of movement. This could mean two things. Either Ilara was already gone, or she was deep in a defensive posture, a spider waiting in her web. Carla hoped for the latter. She found a spot behind a cluster of boulders overlooking the property and watched. For almost an hour, nothing happened. The silence itself was unnerving. Kale's men should have been here by now, swarming the place. Their absence was a tactic. They were waiting for her to make the first move, to reveal herself. Kale knew she was coming. He was counting on her loyalty to another Specter to draw her into the open. Carla refused the bait. She unzipped her backpack and pulled out the secure laptop. Connecting to Julian's network, she sent a single, encrypted burst transmission aimed at the ranch's satellite dish, a digital knock on the door. The message contained only one thing: a string of numbers. It wasn't a code. It was the case number of a mission in Damascus, a mission that had gone horribly wrong, a mission that only she and Ilara had survived. If Ilara was in that house, she would understand. Minutes passed. Nothing. Carla's heart sank. Had she been too late? Was she talking to an empty house? Then, a single floodlight on the corner of the barn flickered on, then off. Twice. It was a reply. Acknowledged. Hostiles present. Before Carla could process the relief, the night erupted. The silence was shattered by the distinct, whirring sound of multiple drones cresting the nearby mesa. They were the large surveillance type, but smaller, faster, tactical models. Ares hunters. Simultaneously, two black SUVs without headlights raced down the dirt road leading to the ranch, kicking up plumes of dust. Kale hadn't been waiting for her. He had been corralling her. The signal jammer had forced his hand, making him accelerate his timetable. He was collapsing the pocket. From the ranch house, the response was immediate and violent. Muzzle flashes lit up a second-story window as a high-caliber automatic rifle opened up, spitting fire at the approaching vehicles. The sound was deafening in the still night air. Ilara wasn't just hiding, she was fortified. The SUVs swerved, one of them crashing into a ditch while figures bailed out of the other, scrambling for cover and returning fire. The desert night turned into a chaotic firefight. Carla was caught in the middle. Her position on the ridge was now dangerously exposed, pinned between Ilara's fortress and Kale's advancing assault team. She had to move. She couldn't help Ilara from here. She had to get inside that house. She slid down the back of the ridge, away from the direct line of fire, and began a wide circling maneuver towards the rear of the property. The drones were the biggest threat. They swooped and darted through the air, their optical sensors glowing like malevolent red eyes. They were searching for targets, and a lone figure running through the desert would be an easy acquisition. She used every dip in the terrain, every shadow, to stay hidden. It was a terrifying game of cat and mouse. At one point, a drone hovered directly over her position, its rotors whipping up a storm of dust. Carla froze, pressing herself flat against the cold sand, barely daring to breathe. She could feel the vibration of the machine through the ground. After a few seconds that felt like an eternity, it moved on, its attention drawn by the continuing firefight at the front of the house. She finally reached the back fence of the ranch. A high chain-link fence, topped with barbed wire. An amateur's obstacle. Carla found a weak point near a post, using her multi-tool to snip the wires and create a small opening. She slipped through, silent as a wraith. The back of the house was dark. She moved along the wall, testing windows and the back door. Everything was locked down tight. She wasn't getting in that way. She looked up. The roof. Ilara had an antenna up there. There had to be an access point. She spotted a sturdy drain pipe running up the side of the house. It was a risk, but it was her only option. As she began to climb, a voice, amplified and chillingly calm, echoed through the canyons. It was Kale. He was using a loudspeaker from one of the vehicles. Specter-Zero, Carla, your friend is trapped. There is no escape for her. This can end now. You are my finest student. Don't let it end like this, dying in the dirt for a failed experiment. Surrender now, and I guarantee you a peaceful end. His voice was a weapon, designed to sow doubt and fear. He wasn't just talking to her. He was talking to Ilara, trying to drive a wedge between them, to make her think Carla might abandon her. She can't help you, Ilara. Kale's voice boomed again. She's alone. We have you surrounded. This is a simple matter of pest control. Carla ignored him, focusing on her climb. Her hands were raw, her muscles screaming in protest. She reached the edge of the roof and hauled herself over, rolling flat to avoid presenting a silhouette against the night sky. The firefight below was still raging, a chaotic symphony of automatic weapons fire. She crawled across the roof towards a skylight she had spotted from the ground. It was locked. Of course, it was. She didn't have time to pick it. She took a calculated risk. Lying on her stomach, she pointed her elbow down and drove it into the glass with all her strength. The pane shattered with a sharp crack, the sound lost in the din of the battle. She quickly cleared the remaining shards of glass from the frame. She dropped through the opening, landing in a crouch in a dark room. She was in. The room was a storage attic, filled with boxes and old furniture. She could hear the battle raging outside the walls. She drew the small pistol Julian had left for her, a compact weapon she hadn't yet had to use, and moved towards the attic door. She found a set of stairs leading down into the main house. The interior was pitch black. Ilara was running on full blackout protocols. Carla moved slowly, her senses on high alert. "Who's there?" a voice hissed from the darkness in front of her. It was Ilara, her English accented, sharp, and dangerous. "Damascus, case 734, Carla whispered back, her hand steady on her weapon. The asset was a professor's son. There was a pause, then the sound of the safety being disengaged. A low-lumen flashlight flicked on, its beam pointed at the floor, illuminating a pair of worn combat boots. The light traveled up, revealing a woman with short, dark hair, a lean, wiry frame, and eyes that burned with a fierce intensity. It was Ilara, older, harder, but unmistakable. She held an assault rifle with the ease of a seasoned professional. "I was wondering if you'd show up," Ilara said, her voice devoid of warmth. It was a statement of fact, not a welcome. "You brought them right to me." "They were already here, Ilara," Carla countered, stepping into the dim light. "They're hunting all of us. David and Marcus are gone. Leo, too." Ilara's expression didn't change, but Carla saw a flicker of something in her eyes, a confirmation of a fear she had clearly been nursing alone in the dark. "I know," Ilara said. "I've been monitoring their communications. This is a purge. Kale's cleaning the slate." She gestured with her rifle towards the front of the house. "He has at least a dozen men out there, plus the drones. We're boxed in." "He thinks we're trapped," Carla said, a plan already forming in her mind. "He's wrong. He taught us to think in 3 dimensions. He's expecting a fight or a surrender. He's not expecting us to vanish." Ilara raised an eyebrow. "Vanish? There's a kill box a mile wide around this house." "He's focused on the house," Carla explained, her voice low and urgent. "It's the center of his chessboard. We need to take it off the board." She looked around the room. It was sparsely furnished, but littered with electronics, wires, and spare parts. It was a workshop. "You have explosives, don't you?" A slow, dangerous smile spread across Ilara's face. It was the first sign of the woman Carla remembered. "I always have explosives," she said. "What do you have in mind?" The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. It was pure Specter logic. While Ilara laid down suppressing fire from the front windows, drawing the attention of Kale's team, Carla moved through the house, planting the small, high-yield charges Ilara had prepared. They didn't have many, only 4, but they would be enough. She placed them on the primary structural supports in the basement, the core of the old ranch house. As she worked, she could hear Kale on the loudspeaker again, his voice laced with impatience. "This is your final offer. Cease hostilities. The next thing you'll hear will be the rocket that brings this house down on top of you." He was escalating. They were running out of time. Carla set the last charge and raced back upstairs. She found Ilara in the main living room, reloading a fresh magazine into her rifle. "It's done," Carla said, her voice breathless. "Timer's set for 5 minutes." Ilara nodded, her eyes glinting. "There's a root cellar out back. It connects to an old storm drain that runs a quarter-mile out into the canyon. It's a tight squeeze, but it'll get us clear of the blast." It was a classic misdirection. While Cale focused his forces on the front, they would escape through the back. They scrambled out a rear window, staying low to the ground. The firefight was still concentrated on the opposite side of the house. They made it to the heavy wooden doors of the root cellar, hidden beneath a tangle of overgrown bushes. They descended into the damp, earthy darkness just as the 5-minute timer expired. The world above them vanished in a cataclysmic roar. The ground shook violently, and the air was sucked out of the cellar. The explosion was immense, far more powerful than Cale's men would have expected. Ilara hadn't just given her explosives. She had rigged the house's propane tank to go up with them. The ranch house didn't just collapse, it vaporized, sending a massive fireball into the night sky. From his command post, Cale would see the destruction of his target. He would assume they were inside, incinerated. He would believe he had won. In the choking dust of the storm drain, Carla and Ilara pushed forward into the darkness. They were bruised, battered, and hunted. But they were alive, and they were together. They had taken Cale's queen off the board. Now, it was time to go after the king. The hunter had become the hunted.